In this video, I would like to introduce you to the concept of absolute value. Absolute value. And all absolute value is referring to is the non-negative or positive value of a number without regard or paying any attention to its sign. So here I've drawn us three absolute values, and I want to explain how to evaluate each of them. So to find the absolute value, like I said earlier, you do not need to pay attention to the sign because absolute value will always be positive. So here we have 9. And absolute value, a good way to think about it is it's just the distance a number from 0. And you don't need to worry if it's going in the negative direction or positive direction. It's just the pure distance. So here we have absolute value of 9. Well, if you look at a number line, here, this isn't a very good number line, but we see 9 over here. Well, this is going to be non-spaces, right? Non-spaces. So this is just 9. And we can do the opposite here. 0, negative 9. Well, it's 9 to the left, but we don't need to pay any attention to its sign, so the absolute value of negative 9 is just positive 9. And it's the same thing for negative 3 here. So we have 0, negative 3. Well, over here it's 3 spaces to the left, but we do not need to regard the sign, so it's just going to be positive. So this is positive 3. And we can do a few more examples. So we will have 11, or the absolute value of 11, its distance from 0 is 11 as well. And here we can have negative 22. Its absolute value or distance from 0 is going to be 22. And as far as the absolute value of 0 goes, that's a parenthesis. As far as the absolute value of 0 goes, well, if you're on 0, like if you were directly on a number line at the point 0, and your point is right here, well, you are none away from 0. Your distance from 0 is nothing. So your distance from 0, or your absolute value of 0, is just going to be 0. Here I've redrawn the numbers that we did in the first examples, but this time notice that each of these numbers are going to have a negative sign out in front of them. And when you have an absolute value with a negative sign out of it, well, we need to remember that the negative sign here, this sign here, just means the opposite of. So you can think of a negative in front of an absolute value sign as the opposite of the absolute value, or the negative of the absolute value, or just the negative absolute value. So this time we're just going to evaluate the absolute value, but then add on a negative sign, because you'll remember that if you have a negative in front of a number, it's just the opposite of its positive counterpart. So here we have the absolute value of 9 is just 9. But then we have this negative out here, so it's going to be the opposite of 9, which is negative 9. And then the same thing here, right? So we have the absolute value of negative 9. Well, the distance from negative 9 from 0 is just 9. And here we have this negative sign, so it's going to be the opposite. And then same thing here. The absolute value of negative 3 is positive 3. And then we have this negative sign, which means the opposite of 3, which is negative 3. Now let's work on a few problems with absolute values. So let's have negative 12 plus the absolute value of negative 12 plus the absolute value of 4. So let's just evaluate both of these absolute values, because what I think about when evaluating absolute values in expressions is just think of the absolute value signs almost as parentheses. So we would evaluate these first. So here we have the absolute value of negative 12. Well, the distance from negative 12 from 0 is 12. And then we are adding the absolute value of 4, which is just going to be 4. And then our answer here is 16. And now let's do this problem. Let's have the absolute value of 5 minus 9. And we can rewrite 5 minus 9 as 5 plus negative 9. Right, 5 plus negative 9. And now we're just dealing with addition with negative numbers. And you'll know, since these are opposite signs, we could subtract 5 from 9 and then add on the sign of the 9, or just start at 5 and then move 9 places to the left, which would give us negative 4. Remember, this is all still in the absolute value sign, right? So now we just need to find the absolute value of negative 4, which is the distance from 0 to negative 4, which is just going to leave us with positive 4, which is our answer here. Let's do a more interesting problem now. Let's have the absolute value of some number that we don't know is equal to positive 8. So here we are already given the value of the absolute value, and we want to determine what are the possible values of n that would give us what are the possible values of n that could give us positive 8. So absolute value, we've already said, is just the distance from this number to 0. So the possible values of n would be all places where n is 8 away from 0. So if we were to draw a number line here, sorry, let me draw this a little bit straighter. If we were to draw a number line here, and this is 0, well, the only places where the value n is exactly 8 away would be 8 in the positive direction and then 8 in the negative direction. So here I'll write this over here, n is equal to 8 or negative 8. It could be either one. Let's do one more problem. This one will be a little bit more challenging. So this time we're going to have negative 2 times the absolute value. And remember, when we have something right outside of either absolute value sign or parentheses, it's an implied multiplication between the two values. And then this is going to be the absolute value of 17 minus 10 plus 6. And then we're going to divide all of this by 4. Because remember, what is in the denominator is dividing the numerator. And keeping this in mind, we can rewrite this problem as negative 2 times the absolute value of 17 minus 10 plus 6, and then divided by 4. So let's evaluate PEMDAS in these parentheses, and you'll notice there's an absolute value sign here, which is just in a way another parentheses because you're going to focus on it first. So we're going to rewrite this as negative 2 times the absolute value of 17 minus 10 is 7 plus 6, and then this is being divided by 4. So now we're going to evaluate this absolute value. So it's negative 2 times 7, since the absolute value of 7 is just 7, plus 6, and then this is still being divided by 4. And then here we can rewrite this as, a positive times a negative is a negative, so this is negative 14 plus 6 divided by 4. And here we have an addition problem with one negative, so we can actually subtract 6 from 14, or we can start with 14 on the negative direction of the number line and then move 6 to the right, and our answer will be negative 8, because we have the sign of the negative 14 since it is the distance greater to the left than 6 is to the right. And this is still being divided by 4. And then a negative being divided by a positive is a negative. So our answer here is negative 2. And we are done.